The exhausted players firmly believe they will not defeat this constantly regenerating final boss anytime soon. The narrator thoughtfully explains the intense hype surrounding this immersive virtual reality game called Sword and Sorceress. Known online as the Destroyer, he proudly claims the prestigious title of the game's fifth best player. Facing the evil spirit Jashin alongside his teammates, he eagerly prepares to unleash a damaging combat skill. He cheerfully bids the defeated boss farewell, noting that the powerful creature was incredibly frustrating to fight. The tired teammates politely say their goodnights and quickly log out of the game to finally rest. Satoshi Osako, widely known in-game as Zealous Merlin, happily inspects the valuable loot they just acquired. Since being abruptly fired from his demanding programming job after a restructuring, he feels incredibly alone. The great sage happily realizes he has abundant experience points while essentially never leaving his apartment. The dark entity suddenly screams that it will exact unforgivable vengeance and completely erase him from existence. The dark goddess furiously curses him for sealing her away, leaving the young gamer feeling thoroughly confused. Around the very same time, all lights in Japan suddenly vanish while the government scrambles to respond. Crows quickly fly overhead as the unconscious man slowly opens his eyes to a strange new light. Sitting up in a dense forest, he worriedly wonders exactly how he suddenly vanished from his room. Gazing up at a second planet floating beside the moon, he shockingly realizes he is not on Earth. He carefully inspects his current outfit and quickly notices it perfectly matches his familiar in-game clothing. A monstrous, carnivorous plant viciously devours an animal right before his very shocked and terrified eyes. Chuckling nervously to himself in disbelief, he firmly concludes that he must be completely losing his mind. He attempts to open his status menu, becoming highly concerned when absolutely nothing happens at first. He is utterly shocked to suddenly see his astronomical level alongside massive health and magic stats. Scanning his overwhelming list of maxed out sage skills, he quickly realizes something is incredibly wrong here. Unfamiliar stats immediately prompt him to open a new message from someone calling herself Megami-chan. The goddess Freya happily introduces herself, leaving the confused man with a deep sense of incoming dread. Freya bluntly explains that the sealed evil spirit maliciously forced his friends to commit sudden suicide. She gleefully reveals she teleported him directly into this newly created game world to generously save him. Furious at her selfish attitude, he vividly imagines punching the arrogant goddess right in the face. He angrily punches a nearby tree, screaming that she carelessly stole the lives of innocent people. Calming down slightly, he decides the smartest move is to escape the forest and find human civilization. He groans in absolute frustration because the endless trees might easily hide unknown and terrifying dangers. Knowing this game world definitely contains monsters, he worries intensely about securing proper food and sleep. A menacing goblin suddenly appears from the brush, making him seriously wonder if he is entirely cursed. Unwilling to kill the creature simply because it is a monster, he quickly turns and runs away. Running frantically through the woods, he angrily curses the entire forest for feeling like a massive trap. He sighs with immense relief as he finally spots a bright light signaling a safe potential village. The ravenous, omnivorous goblins excitedly view the desperately fleeing Satoshi as a giant, incredibly delicious chicken. He finally reaches his absolute limit when a massive horde of terrifying goblins suddenly surrounds him completely. Reaching his absolute breaking point, he angrily tells the surrounding monsters to go straight to hell. He unleashes a devastating Judgment of Darkness spell that instantly obliterates the surrounding terrain and enemies. He stands quietly inside the massive resulting crater, fully realizing the immense magical power he now possesses. Picking up the dropped loot crystals, he regretfully notes that he damaged the beautiful earth entirely unnecessarily. Satoshi reflects on the massive explosion he caused, noting it felt like a missile hit her face. He realizes life is delicate here and sincerely hopes he never has to kill anything ever again. The complexity of countries and laws in this world gives him a painful and persistent headache. Sitting by a campfire, an elderly man kindly asks Tina why she is currently unable to sleep. Tina claims she is fine and no longer a student that he needs to worry about anymore. The old man notes her eyes betray her true feelings despite her attempts to pretend she is okay. Frustrated, Tina wonders why she cannot use magic despite being the granddaughter of a great sage. She laments that results are everything because failure is not tolerated within her noble family lineage. The elder reassures her that she will eventually manifest her magic when the right time finally comes. Tina decides to study her book a bit more before she eventually goes to sleep for the night. Her companion reminds her that getting enough rest is also crucial for maintaining her overall health. As Tina studies, Destiny prepares a funny trick for the girl who will meet a great sage. A full week passes and Satoshi is found sleeping peacefully in the wild among some green leaves. Birds chirp loudly overhead as the exhausted sleeping man slowly begins to finally stir awake. He suddenly slips from his precarious resting place and gasps out in pure startled confusion. A terrifying crazy ape drops down rapidly while screaming aggressively at the bewildered young man. Trembling with immense hunger after escaping, he wonders why his inventory remains entirely completely empty. Noting the incredibly high level of the wary forest rabbit, he carefully prepares his bow. He stares in absolute shock as his fired arrow creates a massive and devastating explosion. Realizing his magically enhanced bow is basically a weapon of mass destruction, he seeks alternatives. Despite utilizing a battle skill called Mercy, he instantly slaughters a fatty orc with ease. He wonders nervously exactly how to butcher his kill, having only learned basic preparation skills. The massive harvested beast suddenly separates perfectly into neat little blocks of cleanly processed meat. He realizes his maxed-out hunter and delicate disassembly skills put him far beyond mankind. Slumping down in utter defeat, he intensely wonders if seeking a secluded life is better. Standing up furiously, he violently screams that the idiots who transformed him are actual devils. The unforgiving environment maliciously forces Satoshi into endless brutal battles against countless terrifying violent monsters. After an entire week of endless relentless attacks, his exhausted mind drastically and completely deteriorates. Murmuring crazily, he wholeheartedly embraces the brutal truth that survival of the fittest dictates everything. Laughing weirdly, he loudly rejoices at finally discovering a paved road leading toward human settlements. Sniffing himself suspiciously, he firmly decides he desperately needs a proper bath before encountering humans. Relaxing entirely naked in the refreshing water, he hums happily while his washed clothes dry. Feeling completely refreshed and finally ready to travel, he confidently throws on his clean cloak. He strolls cheerfully beside a slowly moving carriage while quietly humming a very pleasant tune. The carriage occupants quietly discuss a strange dual-wielding man approaching them from the rear. An older man curiously questions if the approaching stranger is simply the shabbily dressed mage. They discuss how their country explicitly ranks mages by robe color, with gray indicating weakness. The elder explains that pursuing both swordplay and magic usually leaves warriors with half-baked skills. The carriage suddenly stops behind stalled merchants while the princess quietly laments her useless magic. The frustrated traveling group quickly discovers that a massive fallen tree has completely blocked them. Sensing immediate incoming danger, the alert guard strictly orders everyone to carefully watch their surroundings. Shocked screams erupt violently as a hidden group of armed bandits suddenly ambushes the merchants. The terrified elder draws his gleaming weapon while noting their mercenaries are totally outnumbered here. Utilizing a powerful magic sword, he bravely creates a protective barrier to perfectly deflect arrows. The extremely confident bandit leader laughs maniacally while promising the trapped travelers are dead meat. The leader arrogantly demands their goods while verbally mocking the older man's desperate defensive magic. He maliciously reveals the defensive barrier also prevents return magic while promising a relentless barrage. The sweating older man quietly curses under his breath, realizing the bandits planned this perfectly. Satoshi suddenly unleashes a massive frost flower spell that instantly freezes the hostile hidden archers. He nonchalantly calls the surviving attackers generic villains after effortlessly annihilating their entire ranged support. The stunned travelers stare in absolute disbelief at the incredibly powerful dual-wielding gray mage. The furious bandit leader aggressively accuses the intervening stranger of ruthlessly murdering his close friends. Satoshi coldly mocks the angry bandit by suggesting those fallen men were merely disposable tools. The guard urgently yells a warning as mysterious black thunder shots suddenly appear from the sky. The arrogant bandits laugh off the floating dark orbs while totally underestimating the immediate incoming threat. The magical black spheres suddenly zip forward and violently zap the completely shocked enemy bandit attackers. The mysterious gray mage confidently states his surprising proficiency in deadly close-range combat fighting scenarios. He effortlessly slaughters the bunched-up attackers without even bothering to aim his deadly magical dark shots. Giving them one final stern warning, the mage strictly orders the surviving armed thieves to step aside. Trembling in absolute terror, the surviving bandits suddenly realize they are facing an absolute horrific monster. Staring at his own hand, Satoshi quietly wonders if he lost his humanity, feeling absolutely nothing. The furious bandit leader aggressively calls him a coward while aggressively demanding a fair, honorable fight. Visibly annoyed by the blatant hypocrisy, the Grey Mage bluntly questions the bandit leader's actual honor. Readily accepting the hostile challenge, Satoshi rapidly draws his sword and swiftly slices the arrogant man. The horribly dismembered bandit screams in absolute pure agony while the Grey Mage casually mocks his weakness. The agonizing screams echo wildly as Satoshi calmly prepares to officially eliminate the remaining terrified attackers. Watching the brutal one-sided massacre quickly unfold, the terrified older man stares in absolute utter disbelief. The seemingly weak gray-robed man cleanly decapitates another fleeing bandit with absolute ruthless close combat efficiency. Screaming in terror, the remaining bandits desperately promise to become honest farmers while rapidly fleeing away. Satoshi finds it incredibly rude that these atrocious criminals continually dare call him a ruthless monster. A fierce mercenary aggressively slashes down a fleeing bandit to physically ensure absolutely no survivors. Satoshi regretfully realizes his brutal survival mindset will inevitably cause major personal issues in normal civilization. The older man confidently steps forward to sincerely thank the mysterious wandering mage for successfully saving them. He proudly introduces himself as Creston von Solistia while formally expressing his immense personal and heartfelt gratitude. Creston quickly realizes his initial assumption was entirely wrong based on the strange unfamiliar monster pelts. The secretly timid mage nervously panics internally over accidentally befriending a highly influential former royal duke. Satoshi embarrassingly admits he is completely lost while Creston visibly finds this bizarre revelation utterly baffling. The powerful mage genuinely explains his simple lifelong dream of peacefully raising a rural farming family. Stunned by this incredible personal modesty, the former duke enthusiastically declares his immediate liking for Satoshi. Desiring to properly reward him, Creston warmly invites the highly talented young man to personally follow along. Catching the Grey Mage entirely off guard, the curious older gentleman politely asks for his actual name. Smiling warmly, the incredible magical savior formally introduces himself as the humble wandering mage Zealous Merlin. Satoshi politely asks to join their carriage ride since the nearest town remains 3 days away. The older man kindly asks about a reward, but Satoshi explains he intervened completely voluntarily. Creston firmly insists on providing a proper reward because nobles strictly value their honor and duty. Satoshi modestly requests some quiet land far away from human settlements to peacefully grow fresh vegetables. The young girl holding a thick textbook suddenly looks up with a visibly surprised expression. The young girl politely introduces herself as Celestina and graciously thanks their powerful magical savior. Noticing her unexpectedly low magic reserve, Satoshi curiously asks if Celestina is actually a practicing mage. Creston sighs deeply and carefully explains that the fledgling mage currently faces a very frustrating problem. The visibly depressed young noble girl struggles because she seemingly cannot cast any actual magic spells. Sitting inside the rattling carriage, the disguised sage finds her total inability to cast extremely odd. The worried grandfather thoroughly laments that nobody can figure out why she fails basic magic spells. Satoshi logically deduces that any living creature possessing internal mana should easily cast basic magical spells. He thoughtfully asks the surprised nobleman if the country's standard magic spells might actually be defective. Creston acts completely shocked by the audacious suggestion that his country utilizes heavily flawed magic spells. The disguised sage calmly suggests that their standard magical formulas possess serious imperfections regarding mana output. He suddenly asks to carefully inspect the magical textbook currently held by the extremely nervous girl. Glancing over the textbook, he easily identifies terrible flaws indicating the spells were deliberately left incomplete. The older man shouts in absolute disbelief while the young girl gasps at this shocking revelation. He explains that these forceful spells wastefully drain internal mana by heavily utilizing completely useless runes. The thoroughly confused young noble desperately asks him what this terrible discovery actually means for her. Satoshi bluntly states that the overall quality of modern mages remains incredibly terrible due to this. He authoritatively declares it entirely impossible to properly train competent mages using such heavily defective spells. The hopeful girl eagerly begs him to fix the spells by simply removing the useless components. Both desperate nobles immediately beg the powerful sage to generously improve their terribly flawed magic textbook. He wisely explains that constantly failing horribly draining spells created a vicious mental block for Celestina. While the girl rejoices, the perceptive sage privately senses extreme malicious intent woven into the textbook. Smiling confidently, the experienced former programmer enthusiastically agrees to try actively debugging the flawed magical formulas. Brilliant magical text swirls beautifully around his hands as he rapidly restructures the defective spell formulas. The shocked companions watch in total awe as he perfectly optimizes two complete spells incredibly quickly. The mesmerized young noble girl stares blankly and hesitantly asks if this represents a simple torch spell. He proudly confirms optimizing the spell to cleverly draw required energy entirely from external magic sources. The confused girl asks for necessary clarification regarding the specific nature of these external magic sources. Celestina previously believed that activating any magical technique required exclusively consuming the practitioner's personal internal mana. Satoshi gently corrects her fundamental misunderstanding by stating that consuming internal mana remains largely an inefficient method. He thoroughly explains that highly advanced magic safely utilizes the abundant natural mana existing everywhere outside. The former developer quietly compares the highly sophisticated magical runic structure directly to standard computer programming languages. He fondly remembers how dedicated programmers easily reconstructed ancient magical texts during his previous virtual adventures. Creston endlessly praises his unfathomable genius while Satoshi simply points out the blatant systematic magical defects. The extremely impressed older nobleman urgently asks why such an incredible talent refuses to serve nations. Satoshi firmly states he despises annoying political power struggles and simply wants a completely peaceful lifestyle. Realizing he resembles a typical light novel protagonist, the frantic gamer firmly rejects following that predictable path. The sage confidently believes Celestina can eventually use magic by rewriting the ink utilizing basic magic control. Explaining the indispensable magic control skill, he notes maintaining constant flame intensity allows safe carriage spell cancellation. Mastering these fundamental skills eventually allows talented mages to rewrite spells and cast magic without chanting entirely. The highly excited young girl gasps eagerly while asking if she can freely control her own magic. Instructing her to memorize the torch spell, he explains duration limits while she happily promises her best. He explains that living beings constantly produce mana from their life force to power and cast spells. The determined girl focuses intensely and chants the glowing torch spell to reveal her immediate magical path. A tiny puff of magical energy suddenly materializes as she quietly attempts to manifest her new power. Overjoyed by her sudden success, the thrilled young girl happily shows her grandfather her dreamlike magical accomplishment. The proud grandfather warmly praises Tina just before her magical spell suddenly unleashes a massive whooshing sound. The terrified girl screams wildly as the magical flame unexpectedly grows entirely too intense and whooshes violently. Screaming frantically as the fire flickers out, she learns that maintaining constant magical intensity proves incredibly difficult. He advises her to repeatedly drain and recover her mana to efficiently increase both capacity and skill. Burning with sudden fierce determination, the highly confident girl boldly declares this new magical challenge means nothing. The panting grandfather cries tears of joy upon seeing Tina burning with such incredibly rare passionate enthusiasm. Remembering his own past grinding, he notes she can continuously cast physical enhancements to learn resistance skills. The wise sage thoughtfully advises the eager young girl to prioritize steadily increasing her overall mana capacity. Reviewing her incredibly high perseverance and patience skills, he sadly wonders about her undoubtedly harsh past hardships. Surprised by the rapid progress, he quickly flips to page 27 to examine the ice lance. The competitive sage playfully bets he can finish optimizing the entire textbook before her mana completely depletes. The secretly kind older man finishes optimizing quickly but purposefully loses the bet to give Tina satisfaction. Sitting safely by the glowing campfire, the trembling traveler cries tears of absolute joy while holding bread. Sobbing uncontrollably, he recounts being violently chased by wild forest monsters and surviving a terrifying wyvern attack. The utterly shocked nobleman insists killing a massive wyvern easily earns someone the legendary Dragon Slayer title. Casually munching his hard-earned bread, the disguised sage happily dismisses the wyvern as tasty flying lizard. He shares heavily fabricated tales regarding his magical research while casually mentioning the incredibly dangerous behemoth meat. He nostalgically describes forming a highly skilled magical party with 4 close friends before eventually seeking peace. Fascinated by his incredible survival tales, the deeply curious older man eagerly asks about his true rating. Realizing the nobleman actually means his magical level, the cautious sage bluntly states ignorance remains much safer. The flabbergasted guards violently whisper among themselves, completely unable to believe the traveler defeated a literal wyvern. Trembling in pure terror, the intimidated duke realizes this unimaginable wandering mage could effortlessly destroy entire kingdoms. Enjoying his tasty bread, he asks for total secrecy regarding his completely overwhelming status as great sage. Shocked by the sudden honorific, the extremely confused sage desperately asks Celestina who she is calling master. With flushed cheeks and pleading eyes, the highly desperate young girl literally begs him to become teacher. Caught completely off guard by this demanding request, the bewildered man stares blankly and asks for clarification. Celestina wakes up early and cheerfully greets Sensei, having stayed up trying out all the re-edit magic formulas. The girl declares she wants to become a great magic teacher without collapsing from exhaustion like him. Pouting slightly, she questions why she is being called brutal just because she is a little like him. The sage sighs, wishing to relax in a courtyard with tea, though he admits having teaching methods to consider. He asks if there is a school for mages and how long the tutoring lasts before her academy returns. The nervous girl explains that noble children learn advanced magic at the Istal Magic Institute involving various factions. Sensing trouble, the sage notes that based on the terrible textbook, the troublesome academy is not teaching magic properly. The text dramatically announces the sudden appearance of a terrifying level 60 blood bear with massive health points. The girl screams in sheer terror while the sage calmly prepares to use steel manacles on the beast. As the massive bear roars fiercely, the sage asks the terrified girl if she has learned any combat magic. The crying girl frantically explains she can only cast magic 3 times, while the sage encourages shooting it. Activating the devil blessing skill, the wise sage gently promises to share some of his mana with the girl. Focusing her newly found power, she hesitantly prepares to cast a crimson fireball to burn her approaching enemies. Following the sage instructing her to use a different spell, she unleashes a wind blade that completely shocks everyone. The powerful air slash hits the massive bear, causing the beast to roar in pain while the girl screams. The supportive sage quickly catches the exhausted girl as she suddenly collapses backwards from the intense magical exertion. Her status screen shows Celestina reached level 11, displaying huge improvements in multiple elemental magics and personal skills. Observing her surprising level of growth, the sage wonders if this incredible progress stems from a special bonus effect. The flustered girl wakes up completely embarrassed and immediately apologizes for suddenly collapsing into her teacher's arms. The sage congratulates the confused girl, proudly informing her that she just successfully reached level 11. Staring in utter disbelief, the shocked girl struggles to comprehend that her level incredibly increased by 6. The sage calmly asks if there are more monsters while the girl frantically begs him to stop the madness. With tears of joy, the proud grandfather congratulates Tina for successfully slaying a terrifying monster with her own hands. After dismantling the fallen beast and eating breakfast, the traveling group finally resumes their journey toward Santal. The massive city serves as an important trading hub and is known as the largest settlement within their territory. The magnificent stone castle walls tower beautifully above the peaceful river flowing gently under the protective city bridges. Positioned near a thriving river between mountains, the prosperous trading hub remained uncaptured despite being nicknamed Blood-Stained City. Discovering the older man is retired, the curious sage asks about the current duke who inherited the trusted rank. The grandfather worries about unknown grandchildren causing inheritance disputes because his son is incredibly fond of women. Staring at the diligently studying girl, the sage secretly wonders if Celestina is actually one of those illegitimate grandchildren. The older man asks about his wealth before advising him to sell his rare mana stones to specialized shops. The shocked Duke explains that the unprecedented magic stones would fetch enough money to play around for quite some time. Staring at his game inventory screen, the bewildered sage honestly admits he has no idea how this system works. The sage passes off the incredibly convenient game inventory system as an ancient and difficult form of magic. The quiet carriage slowly travels up a peaceful hill surrounded by beautiful leafy trees on a bright sunny day. Approaching his new villa, the sage observes the rocky cliff and surrounding forest standing near the center. The massive iron gates stand impressively before the magnificent sprawling mansion nestled comfortably against the tall mountain range. The highly impressed sage happily remarks that the elegant garden field looks incredibly simple yet spectacularly beautiful. The excited sage eagerly anticipates practicing agriculture since most vegetables are grown self-sufficiently alongside purchased meat. The caring grandfather asks if the young girl can carry her own luggage inside the beautifully lit entrance hall. Celestina notes Sensei lacks a wand while he explains learning normal civilian life builds incredibly important personal discipline. She curiously asks if his ring is mithril, but he explains it is a metal grads acting as medium. The text box reveals metal grads are highly territorial metal-eating dragons living in dangerous volcanic areas that kill intruders. The perceptive Duke realizes fighting such a dangerous dragon makes the exhausted mage's desire for absolute peace entirely understandable. A sharply dressed butler named Dandy alongside a polite maid named Misuka respectfully introduce themselves to the wandering sage. The highly professional butler respectfully offers to prepare clean clothes and politely asks to lead the guest inside. The incredibly exhausted sage gratefully accepts because he desperately wants to finally sleep safely under a solid roof. The deeply moved Duke sympathetically watches him cry while noting the poor man clearly suffered through incredibly terrible hardships. Celestina cheerfully waves goodbye to her exhausted teacher before heading off to handle her own personal daily tasks. The highly professional butler politely leads the deeply grateful wandering mage down the quiet and extremely lavish hallway. Stepping inside the gorgeously decorated guest room, the completely overwhelmed sage blushes while admiring the stunningly beautiful furnishings. Looking around the incredibly peaceful and luxurious guest room, he sincerely thanks the highly attentive butler for the accommodations. Dandy sternly explains that this extremely lavish room remains strictly reserved only for their absolute most important visiting guests. The butler firmly states this exceptional treatment is entirely expected because Satoshi heroically saved both the master and lady. The flustered sage sweats nervously while protesting that handling a few random bandits barely warrants such incredibly exceptional treatment. Overwhelmed by the luxurious hospitality, he nervously realizes his actions definitely created unexpectedly powerful ties with high-ranking nobles. The attentive butler politely asks if the honored guest wishes to enjoy a relaxing hot bath before eating dinner. The strict butler cautiously asks the wandering commoner if he actually understands proper high-class aristocratic bathing etiquette rules. Satoshi confidently pumps his fist and proudly declares that washing oneself before entering the bath is simply common sense. Assuming the mage possesses high-class aristocratic etiquette, Dandy politely instructs him to quickly change his dirty clothes here. The highly excited sage cheerfully strips off his traveling gear while happily singing about getting into a hot tub. Misuka suddenly asks Dandy why he is standing outside while the utterly shocked butler realizes he mistakenly escorted Celestina. Opening the bathroom door, the completely naked sage stares in absolute utter shock at the equally naked bathing girl. A massive ear-splitting scream violently echoes through the entire luxurious mansion as absolute chaotic panic suddenly and immediately erupts. Seeking good textbooks for classes, he asks Misuka if the grand mansion contains a library room. The flustered sage frantically apologizes to the intensely blushing maid for earlier causing such massive trouble. He deeply apologizes to an incredibly furious Creston for accidentally witnessing the young granddaughter's naked body. He logically reasons that a furious reaction remains expected even though Celestina is simply a child. Swearing upon his absolute goodness, the exasperated man firmly declares he is definitely not a vermin. Apologizing for dragging him into chaos, Misuka politely shows the remarkably calm sage toward the library. Staring at the massive towering bookshelves, the deeply amazed sage confidently decides to start researching history. Utilizing high translation skills, he smoothly reads how advanced magic civilizations suddenly disappeared without a trace. He meticulously discovers that civilization levels dropped markedly because various magical documents vanished during old wars. Examining the flawed magical paper, he realizes missing knowledge severely degraded the overall quality of spells. Carefully analyzing complex numerical machine languages, he deeply regrets needing extremely rare equipment like philosopher's stones. Remembering terrible catastrophic gaming explosions, the older man strongly prefers avoiding such dangerously extinct ancient magic. He deeply wonders how the massive incomplete defense computer Babel perfectly managed these incredibly enormous systems. Morning sunlight strikes the beautiful mansion as Masuka gently warns the young lady regarding incoming tutoring. The embarrassed young girl blushes fiercely while vividly recalling how vastly different her teacher's body looked. Seeking to calm the heavily blushing lady, Masuka gently suggests the great sage noticed absolutely nothing. The serious maid firmly warns the highly impressionable girl against adopting her new teacher's reckless lifestyle. Clutching her pillow tightly, the thoroughly confused young girl earnestly asks why she must avoid recklessness. Masuka seriously explains how his relentless battlefields and constant magical experiments required wildly dangerous personal sacrifices. The eager young student passionately argues that her highly competent teacher currently desires only complete peace. Gazing thoughtfully through the bright window, the wise maid knowingly reflects that nobody remains unchanged forever. She quietly states that his profoundly heavy life experiences naturally forced his mindset to slowly mature. Listening intently to the unexpectedly profound wisdom, Celestina innocently asks the serious maid about her age. Projecting terrifying menace, the smiling maid violently reminds the terrified girl that asking ages remains rude. The intensely anxious young noble desperately attempts to focus while sitting closely beside her magical teacher. Standing beside her wooden desk, the highly experienced teacher carefully initiates their fundamental magical symbol lessons. The astonished girl asks if he brilliantly decrypted those seemingly impossible sacred letters during his studies. He thoroughly explains that these ancient interacting symbols merely function as languages for properly gathering mana. Staring intensely, the amazed student listens carefully as he expertly proposes logically disassembling the torch spell. Showing a glowing magical circle, he brilliantly describes utilizing external environmental mana to safely regulate airflow. The smiling teacher wisely explains that expertly deciphering specific meanings eventually allows perfect physical magical conversions. Sitting enthusiastically at her desk, the fascinated student eagerly proposes utilizing standard Elven or Dwarven dictionaries. The cheerful wandering sage warmly advises his eager student to simply treat magical decoding like puzzles. He cleverly compares magical formulas to sturdy eggshells that safely collect massive power before causing phenomena. Burning with intense personal curiosity, the highly enthusiastic young girl eagerly demands to see his magic. Staring incredibly seriously, the experienced sage firmly decides she must immediately learn about immense magical dangers. He suddenly projects a mysterious dark magical cube, leaving the young student completely mesmerized by power. Glowing incredibly brightly, the highly concentrated dark magical artifact violently overwhelms her completely stunned personal senses. The terrifyingly calm teacher firmly warns that invoking dark judgment would instantly vaporize their surrounding areas. The bewildered girl desperately demands to know exactly why he happily practices incredibly dangerous destructive magic. Zealous explains the danger of being a mage and being dragged into power conflicts for being too strong. He warns that power will be used to kill others and produces grudges, which is a sacred taboo. Neutrality is essential because magic should help people and make lives easier instead of being used for war. Turning to the girl, he asks Celestina what specific type of magician she truly wants to become later. She stutters while considering what kind of magician she wants to be and her personal goals for achievement. She explains that she never thought of magic as a tool for battle and dislikes mages who fight. He advises looking within for answers while assuring her that it is okay to not decide immediately yet. The sage suggests resuming practice tomorrow while admitting he shouldn't talk about proper uses of dangerous magical things. Tina admires her dear teacher for living a neutral lifestyle without drowning in his own incredibly massive power. The humble man calls himself a pretender and jobless adult while warning her not to follow his path. Creston greets Tina and asks how the lesson went while she returns from her tutoring session with Zealous. She happily explains the enjoyable lesson focused on how magic can help people and be easy to understand. She thinks people in this country will accept mages pleasantly if they use magic for the people benefit. Creston notes that magicians are disliked for their arrogant behavior and many arrogant mages exist in reality now. She mentions brothers fighting over succession and intense faction conflicts occurring within her own academy and territory schools. Correcting magic prevents endless war loops while the sage asks if she considers those who use her hostile. The next day a grotesque mud monster suddenly appears before the group in the open grassy field terrain. He explains that the mud monster possesses stats equal to those of a level 3 golem enemy type. Mages run away without mana because survival changes based on the distance between them and their hostile enemy. Failing exposes allies to danger because only spoiled fools believe they can always cast spells from safety now. Waiting for support mages fire from safety which creates bad terms between them and the protective country knights. Mages earn time thanks to guards while useless factions unfortunately fight over their own specific standing positions now. He will train her to overcome disadvantages because mages become normal men when they run out of mana. She shouts yes as he advises using various styles and considering distance instead of only relying on magic. He orders her to pay attention and be careful to not get injured as they start their training. Celestina screams a battle cry while swinging her heavy iron mace violently against the grotesque and muddy monster. The sage observes her close-range fighting and notes that she seems surprisingly accustomed to these combat demands. He wonders if her proficiency is training or raw talent and if she learned by watching someone else. She shouts with determination while holding her shield high and striking the monster with her heavy iron weapon. Satoshi decided to not be easy on her because this training will help her later with this lesson. Sweating profusely, the young girl realizes this situation isn't pretty while nervously preparing to fight back. He notes she lacks pacing mindset because understanding the situation and choosing strategies require actual combat. Realizing the golems will keep regenerating unless their core is destroyed, she completely unleashes an aqua jet. The exhausted girl happily shouts that she finally got out while he mockingly calls it quite cute. A remaining muddy limb suddenly violently grabs her ankle, causing the terrified girl to scream loudly. He strictly warns the surprised girl to never lose focus until all remaining enemies are completely finished. She finds failing extremely frustrating, but he reassuringly notes this was a surprisingly decent first practice training. He refuses to assist her, explaining that analyzing combat styles and failing are both essential learning forms. Panting heavily from the intense training, the exhausted young girl quietly mutters that her sensei is really strict. He calmly explains that training prevents grievous injuries and dying because it allows thorough preparation before fighting. Planning to continue tomorrow, he advises the understanding girl that losing is often highly constructive for development. The thoughtful teacher quietly wonders if giving his dedicated student a special reward would provide excellent motivation. He seriously promises Celestina a reward if she manages to quickly raise 3 separate skills within 2 months. The incredibly confident sage dramatically promises to personally teach the eager young girl his very own original spell. Completely shocked by this unprecedented generous offer, the young girl excitedly asks if he is absolutely sure. He playfully remarks that having a useful magical goal to achieve makes the intense learning process extremely fun. Clenching her fists tightly, the highly motivated student passionately screams that she will absolutely accomplish this task. The older men warmly watch her excitement, noting that learning original spells basically proves she is his successor. Expecting extremely destructive magical attacks, the incredibly curious older duke immediately asks exactly what kind of spell it is. Smiling confidently at the highly curious older man, the wandering sage politely asks if he wishes to see it. The eager older man challenges the mage to hit him with everything, ignoring that he will demonstrate it here. The extremely confident duke boldly stares down the calm wandering sage as they prepare for a magical demonstration. The duke aggressively summons the dragon of the netherworld, commanding purgatory flames to completely annihilate his confident enemies. Standing completely unfazed against the overwhelming magical pressure, the calm sage prepares to perfectly deflect the massive attack. The stunned duke watches in utter disbelief as the calm sage effortlessly blocks everything, utilizing a divine silver shell. The wise sage proudly explains that his versatile barrier spell can instantly change shape and become a sharp sword. He thoroughly explains that this highly efficient barrier requires minimal mana while fantastically countering massive energy-based magical attacks. The absolutely terrified older Duke instantly realizes this highly adaptable defensive barrier is basically a terrifying mage-killing weapon. The sage confidently clarifies that attacking outside weapon range easily defeats anyone except those utilizing large area effect spells. The highly impressed Duke praises the excellent spell, noting an invisible slashing barrier leaves regular magicians completely entirely defenseless. The extremely proud teacher joyfully wonders what fearsome nickname his talented young student will obtain in the distant future. 2 peaceful weeks quickly pass while the diligent sage happily spends his relaxing days farming and tutoring the girl. Craving local currency, the clever sage suddenly remembers hearing about a specific store paying exceptionally good money for magic stones. The concerned butler carefully draws a simple map while the excited sage eagerly wishes to explore this new world. The butler sternly warns him to completely avoid the dangerous old town where vicious kidnappers actively sell human slaves. Walking gracefully out of the massive mansion, the extremely confident sage gratefully thanks the worried butler for his warnings. Ignoring an angry shouting merchant in the extremely crowded streets, he firmly decides to quickly locate the magic shop. Staring at the incredibly creepy and seemingly abandoned dark building, the highly confused sage desperately wonders if this is correct. Noticing a terrifying skull resting near the door, he nervously concludes this incredibly creepy place naturally repels regular normal customers. Suppressing his intense lingering fear, the brave sage boldly enters the extremely unsettling shop to quickly complete his magical transaction. The bespectacled shop clerk welcomes the mysterious traveler into her creepy store with a polite but very startled greeting. Zealous confidently presents a massive bag containing hundreds of magic stones harvested from various powerful and dangerous goblin monsters. The stunned clerk carefully inspects the pile of gems while the traveler asks her to verify their legitimacy immediately. She inwardly doubts the quality of the items, assuming a lowly mage could never obtain such high-grade materials. The clerk explains that such massive magic stones only exist within the incredibly dangerous and distant dark green areas. Pointing an accusing finger, she claims he must have stolen them since grey mages cannot survive the Fafuran forest. Zealous calls her rude while explaining he personally defeated the monsters in the forest that locals usually avoid entirely. The clerk gasps in total disbelief upon hearing that the strange wandering traveler currently resides at the Duke mansion. She calls his claim a blatant lie while the traveler asks if she intends to insult an honored guest. The mage coldly warns her that insulting noble guests could lead to life in prison or even immediate execution. The store manager suddenly arrives to demand an explanation for all the noise the clerk is currently making now. The manager threatens to dock her pay for driving away customers while the traveler questions their hostile business practices. The clerk desperately attempts to justify her actions by pointing out the traveler's low-ranking and dirty gray robe. The manager suddenly realizes the traveler is wearing legendary behemoth skin leather while the clerk stares in absolute shock. The stubborn clerk continues to insist the rare material is merely a dirty and worthless robe despite her manager. Noticing the intense atmosphere, someone quietly decides to stay silent because they definitely do not want to die today. To compensate for the rudeness, the manager offers a special bonus while Zealous admits he is currently completely penniless. The manager sternly orders the clerk to come over quickly to help process the transaction for their important guest. She explains the macabre decor is a personal hobby while Zealous wonders if the clerks actually decorated the shop. The manager presents the final payment for the massive collection of magic stones the traveler brought into the store. The clerk announces the total is over 2 million gold pieces as the traveler smiles with absolute pure satisfaction. Shocked by the massive sum, Zealous listens as she explains the bonus for the rude treatment and rare stone. The manager expresses her absolute amazement at encountering such a massive magic stone from a powerful goblin king enemy. Zealous appreciates her beauty but senses danger while the manager insists he return with more magic stones very soon. The manager furiously berates the clerk for picking a fight with someone who is clearly an absolute magical monster. She explains that grey behemoth leather is impossibly rare while admitting her own body froze upon seeing him enter. The confused clerk asks if he is truly amazing since he appeared to be just a very normal mage. The manager wonders where the Duke found such a man who could kill anyone in a single breath second. Zealous explores the market and learns that 100 gold is enough to live comfortably for an entire month. Drawn to a delicious fragrance, he discovers wild Holstein meat skewers and decides to purchase one for himself immediately. He rejoices at the juicy fatty flavor and rich spices while happily noting the meat is incredibly high quality. Realizing the taste is spectacular, he buys 50 skewers but immediately worries he may have purchased way too many. A merchant explains that metal prices are high because demons inhabit the areas where the ores are sourced from. He mentions the worsening conflict between knights and mages which might lead to a dangerous coup d'état very soon. The traveler thanks the merchant for the skewers while hearing a suggestion to visit the local mercenary guild instead. Zealous smiles broadly after finally discovering the exact location he was looking for in the busy and crowded city. He walks through the streets smoking fresh tobacco and enjoying the dry flavor of the unique local tobacco blend. Suddenly realizing he has lost, Zealous stares at a broken fountain and wonders where he has actually wandered off. He observes the maintained ruins and realizes he has accidentally entered the old city located near the local slums. Sensing an immediate presence, he wonders if he is being followed or walked into some kind of clever trap. A child suddenly screams for meat while calling out to him as uncle, which causes the traveler great confusion. Zealous looks down in absolute shock at being called uncle by a random child while sweating nervously in confusion. Zealous spots the Lord's son and realizes with shock that the man is actually Celestina's own brother. The arrogant noble Schweith tells a beautiful woman to give up and become his woman for support. The determined woman rejects him immediately while firmly telling the persistent nobleman to finally give it a rest. Zealous stares in confusion while asking himself exactly who that mysterious and beautiful young woman could actually be. The cheeky orphanage children loudly explain that the pretty woman is actually their very own beloved nun. Zealous considers speaking with their parents but learns the children are orphans and the story goes back. The children explain they have no parents because they live together inside the local city orphanage building. Zealous feels terrible realizing these poor orphans living in such a sketchy place lack a balanced diet. The children cheer with absolute joy when the kind man finally decides to help them with food. He asks the excited kids to guide him directly toward the orphanage so he can deliver the meat. Carrying a large bag, he explains he must speak with the orphanage staff before handing over the food. A wild 3-second rule appears as they discuss picking up dropped food before it becomes totally dirty. He tells Roddy and Kai that he must obtain permission from their legal guardian before giving them meat. A 13-year-old girl insists she is totally an adult despite being the same age as Celestina. He politely asks the orphanage representative to accept the meat so the children can have a good meal. Spotting Creston's mansion nearby, he realizes he can easily find his own way back home from here. Schweith van Solistia continues harassing the nun while demanding she finally stop clinging to the orphanage. The arrogant noble brags about being the successor and the top ace mage of the Magic Academy. Zealous notes many familiar names in the noble's boastful sentence while staring blankly at the chaotic scene. The exhausted sage wonders why he keeps running into trouble when he only wants a peaceful life. The children bluntly suggest the noble is in heat or suffering from a very serious love syndrome. Zealous wonders if humans in this world go into heat while feeling shocked by the children's blunt words. The nun Lazarus firmly declares she is not property while Schweith asks how long she can act. She accuses him of being the reason the orphanage ended up in a dump and refuses a coward. The noble threatens to kick Lazarus and her precious children completely out of town for her constant defiance. She claims his brother Croesus would be a much better lord than a despicable failure like himself. Schweith screams in rage because Lazarus clearly prefers his own little brother over him in this situation. Zealous decides to lend a hand because a diplomatic incident might occur if the noble attacks the nun. The sage realizes the noble was flatly rejected yet keeps chasing after her like a complete idiot. The children laugh while calling the noble a baby for his pathetic and useless levels of wishful thinking. Zealous pities the man for shooting himself in the foot over his very first love interest today. Both Schweith and Lazarus look completely shocked as Zealous suddenly intervenes in their heated and public argument. Bystanders mock the noble for his complete lack of confidence and idiocy regarding his poor romantic approach. People discuss how first impressions are important and suggest wooing her with a more confident presentation. The crowd laughs while calling the noble a total loser and warning the kids not to become him. The public gossips that the next lord should care much more about his physical appearance and behavior. Crowds recognize Shweeth as Duke Solistia's son and wonder if he really mentioned being the next lord. He is called a reckless and irredeemable failure for flaunting his authority in the middle of a crowd. The text declares his lordship is as dead as his love life and his affinity is in gutter. Zealous decides to ignore the noble and asks the sister what to do with the meat skewers. Zealous introduces himself as an ordinary citizen who simply had a run-in with the orphanage children. Lazarus explains that making ends meet is very difficult without financial aid for the struggling orphanage. The nun confirms that their situation became dire specifically because of the actions of that nobleman. She harshly criticizes the noble as a despicable coward and the worst human being she knows. Zealous thinks to himself that such objective criticism should finally make the arrogant man snap out of it. The kind sage offers to compensate for the meat skewers he provided to the hungry children earlier. He insists the meal is a donation because growing children need to eat a lot after all. Lazarus expresses her sincere gratitude while the furious nobleman continues to scream loudly in the background. Zealous mentions buying 50 skewers and notes he cannot possibly finish them all on his own. The enraged noble screams that he is a high-ranking nobleman and the son of the duke. Zealous mockingly praises the man for being honorable enough to wait until their conversation was finally over. Shweeth shouts that he will not be made a fool of by a measly grey-robe mage. He arrogantly claims that a red-robe mage exists on a completely different level than a noob. Zealous calmly reminds the furious man that he is not actually from around these local parts. The sage suggests that the local logic regarding robe colors simply does not apply to him at all. Shweeth screams about being a high-ranking mage while Zealous dismissively scoffs at his petty ranking. Zealous warns him that picking a fight without knowing an opponent's strength will not bode well. The nobleman loses his temper and launches a fireball at the peasant whom he calls a wannabe. Zealous effortlessly deflects the magical blast with his bare hand while the children scream in total terror. He calmly asks the noble to stop blasting magic dangerously in the middle of a crowded town. Shweeth is shocked to discover that his opponent possesses combat skills and is not just a mage. Zealous declares that his fists should be plenty to deal with a man of the noble's caliber. Shweeth orders his guards to buy him time so he can incinerate the crook with powerful magic. The sage warns the guards that drawing their swords will be the last thing they ever do. The guards freeze as they realize his guard is perfect and he feels completely different now. Terrified by his overwhelming pressure, the guards fear that the mysterious man will devour them completely. Zealous uses an appraisal skill and notes that their combat levels and skills are incredibly disappointing. He observes that Shweeth is a level 50 fire mage currently suffering from a brainwashed debuff. The noble panics because Zealous can see everything and decides he must use his last option. Shweeth begins a dangerous incantation by calling upon the flames of purgatory to destroy his enemies. A guard warns that the massive spell will scorch the entire area as the noble chants. The noble laughs maniacally while launching a swarm of dragons to annihilate the seemingly defenseless sage. Zealous recognizes the Dragon Inferno destruction spell because he saw Creston use it much earlier today. He counters the massive flames using a physical combat skill called Phantom Rush to clear the area. Zealous effortlessly extinguishes the fire and calmly notes that it was finally the last of it. Lazarus and the orphanage children stare at the sage with absolute awe after witnessing his power. He notes that the spell definitely packed more of a punch when the former duke performed it. Shweeth collapses in total despair because his most powerful spell was simply brushed off like nothing. The nun is stunned to hear the sage mention Creston while wondering if he knows the duke. Zealous asks if Creston is her grandfather while confirming he is currently staying at the mansion. Shweeth breaks down in tears of regret upon realizing the man actually knows his powerful grandfather. The sage tells the crying noble that he must clean up his own mess before leaving. Shweeth grovels on the ground while the stern guards threaten to report his actions to his grandfather. The narrator declares that great power requires responsibility and refuses to let the coward escape with mercy. Pleading on all fours, the desperate nobleman begs for forgiveness but finds only cold and absolute rejection. Celestina gazes at Zealous with intense curiosity while wondering why his overwhelming mana remains completely undetectable here. The sage explains that his massive mana field stays hidden from those with insufficient magical skill levels. He admits to illegally peeking at stats while claiming mages frequently ignore privacy laws in this world. Zealous sheepishly confesses that he has been admiring her impressive personal statistics for quite a long time. The perverted sage makes a lewd comment about her magnificent twins, causing the young woman to scream. Lazarus angrily calls him a pervert, while the embarrassed man offers a quick and very insincere apology. The sage shamelessly claims that dirty jokes are the essential lifeblood for men of his advanced age. She continues her verbal assault by calling him obscene and disgraceful while he maintains a harmless demeanor. The frustrated woman determines that every single man in existence is nothing but a complete perverted pig. Zealous points toward the guards while mockingly asking them to confirm his theory about men and women. The guards blush furiously as the nun aggressively labels them all as disgusting and completely shameless pigs. Zealous aggressively questions if they are truly uninterested in a beautiful girl with such massive physical attributes. Lazarus blushes deeply while the sage swears to God that he appreciates her undeniable and spectacular beauty. The sage casually asks about the kitchen location while the defeated nobleman screams in the distance behind. Zealous inspects the abandoned backyard while learning that the rocky land was meant to become a cemetery. The sage declares he has a great idea and promises to return tomorrow to fix the field. Duke Delsasis furiously berates his son for losing a fight to a guest of his own father. The stern leader calls Shweeth a complete disgrace to their noble family line while the son trembles. Creston sips his tea while casually remarking that losing to Zealous was always a very predictable outcome. The Duke asks for the identity of this mysterious man while his father warns him about secrecy. Creston reveals the shocking truth that the powerful wanderer is actually the private tutor for young Celestina. Both high-ranking nobles turn pale with shock as they process the gravity of their earlier mistake. They realize that a man of his unfathomable talents refusing national service represents a massive potential threat. Shweeth realizes in total horror that he foolishly picked a fight with a legendary and invincible monster. Creston explains that Tina is mastering magic now thanks to the level 1000 Great Sage guidance. The Duke wonders if Zealous is even human after hearing he supposedly perished while sealing a devil. They worry about their fate while considering how to convince the powerful sage to join their faction. Creston expresses personal excitement regarding her rapid progress with the refined and highly efficient magical textbook now. The grandfather advises the Duke to give Tina more attention while revealing he secured the refined textbook. They discuss the charming nature of her mother and the intense jealousy found within the Duke's household. The Duke is accused of abusing his authority to have his way with various beautiful young women. The two men continue their heated argument until they finally tell each other to give it a rest. Back at the mansion, Zealous tells Celestina that today's lesson will involve a very special magical experiment. He promises to demonstrate magic that focuses on improving lives rather than just causing destruction and death. Zealous observes that cultivating the rocky land would provide a massive harvest if it were actually manageable. He notes that the ground is currently far too hard and full of useless rocks for farming. The sage determines to use magic to prove that power is good for more than just fighting. Lazarus is deeply surprised to learn that a mage's magic can be used for more than offensive purposes. Zealous explains that healing and offensive magic are actually just two sides of the same coin for practitioners. Disputing her belief, he claims that holy magic is hardly a miracle bestowed by a divine god. He describes how different schools of magic branched off during the chaos following the ancient Devil War. Zealous claims he can use all types of healing magic including curing poison and purifying the undead. Lazarus realizes his power is beyond the high priest while worrying about the information getting out eventually. He dismisses the status of priests and mages while wanting to avoid ruffling feathers with the Inquisition. Lazarus wonders about nations built on the notion that magic is a miracle from a holy god. Zealous notes that this discovery does not change much and people are free to make their own changes. The sage laughs while the nun insists that the religious implications of his claims are no laughing matter. Lazarus asks if he hates God or fears receiving divine retribution for his seemingly heretical views. He admits he hates the irresponsible bastard whose actions put him in this current difficult mess. Zealous decides to get back to the current problem while Lazarus wonders if he met God. He tells the group to back up as a pack of wild children suddenly appears demanding meat. The sage prepares to cast a powerful magic spell called Gaia Control to fix the rocky field. Demonstrating his skill, he makes the rocks float gently while the onlookers watch his magic in awe. Zealous gets rid of the stones and decides to skip using fertilizer for the orphanage crops. Lazarus is deeply moved by witnessing magic being used to make people truly happy and productive. She realizes this new type of magic helps people rather than causing them any potential harm. The sage finishes the job by building a stone wall to fence off the newly created field. Meanwhile, the excited children cheer for their uncle while also aggressively demanding some meat and more. He explains that Lazarus can earn extra income by growing and selling various herbs and vegetables. Overwhelmed by his incredible generosity, the nun wonders how she could ever repay him for this help. Zealous tells her not to worry about payment since this entire project was just a magical experiment. To his surprise, Lazarus and Celestina both agree that the sage is an amazing and truly incredible person. He notes that large area magic drains lots of mana and still has room for future improvement. Zealous worries that average people would collapse if they tried using such inefficient and mana-heavy spells. Lazarus asks what other uses exist for spells that are incredibly useful in construction and agriculture. The sage explains that he does not want to see his original spells used for war. He describes how civilians could be conscripted as combat engineers if magic becomes too easy for everyone. Lazarus is stunned by how far ahead he was thinking while he casually ignores the details. Zealous plans to let the higher-ups deal with the details while he makes magic easier. Chuckling nervously, he laughs and repeats that he is not dealing with the pesky details of his magic. The group turns their attention to deciding exactly what they should plant in the newly cleared field. Lazarus worries that tending to such a large field alone will be very difficult with her duties. Zealous suggests making the kids work to teach them the importance of an honest day's work. Celestina agrees that the orphans will learn to be self-sufficient and gain knowledge while working. He admits that it pisses him off when people take things for granted like these cheeky kids. The sage tells the nun that the birds must eventually leave the nest sooner or later. Celestina reveals she obtained various seeds including hairy onion and muscled Popeye from the mansion. Zealous presents seeds for mandrake and healing grass that he picked up in the Great Woods. He tells the group not to worry because mandrake screams killing people is just an urban legend. The children complain that working is a pain and they could get better stuff by begging. Zealous smashes a massive rock while warning them to be ready to put their lives on the line. The fist fight at the Delsasis mansion concludes with the Duke knocking out his own son. Reflecting on her past, Celestina notes she has always been an observer during her time at the academy. Because of her low magic ability, the academy never allowed her to participate in combat training sessions. She watched fellow students fail due to arrogance as dangerous goblins were released during their practice. Biting her lip in frustration, she vowed to never let the knowledge gained from observation go to waste. Suddenly springing into action, she unleashes a powerful explosion of force to strike her training target. She identifies the mud golem cores while noting their simple movements are entirely predictable and easy to counter. Watching from the sidelines, Zealous observes the young girl and notes she is performing much better than expected. Chanting a powerful spell, Celestina summons stone spears to pierce the enemy targets with her rock lance magic. Zealous is genuinely surprised to see her omit the incantation while utilizing an advanced power boost skill. He tells the girl she might finally be ready for the real deal after she successfully destroys the golems. They discuss the potential for a real hunt while wondering if it is too early to encounter monsters. Creston mentions the great woods of Faflan while expressing concern over the area legendary and terrifying dangers. The old man vividly imagines filthy beasts attacking his precious granddaughter and immediately develops a very bad feeling. He suggests arranging a whole division of troops to escort the young girl into the dangerous forest area. Tina protests her grandfather plan to use peasants as monster bait while she escapes to safety. Creston claims a true nobleman can make any problem go away if they simply have enough money. Zealous calls the nobleman an evil bastard while Creston plans to help the knight commander find his edge. The group discusses putting together top-notch gear using the right materials found in their magical world. Creston suggests light leather armor because it is perfectly suited for the needs of a mobile mage. The curious young girl asks if Zealous will personally handle making the new equipment for her. Zealous looks confused as the conversation shifts toward her grandfather, who seems to have his own motivations. The sage tries to calm Creston while the old man makes excuses to fondle his precious granddaughter. Creston acts inappropriately while claiming she is just a child and feeling up every inch of her body. The frustrated nobleman yells about his daughter's attractiveness while Zealous asks what he actually wants. They decide that Creston Craftsman will build the gear while Zealous handles the secondary magical enhancements. Shweeth watches Celestina from afar and wonders how she managed to grow so powerful in such a short time. He recalls her being a gloomy doll but notices her newfound confidence and impressive magical strength. The arrogant noble complains about Zealous and the ridiculous number of golems the man can control at once. He ponders why such a powerful mage would refuse to side with any nation in this world. Misuka suddenly appears at the estate and greets Shweeth as they discuss the mysterious wandering sage. She asks if the young noble is interested in learning how Zealous controls tens of golems simultaneously. Shweeth claims a thirst for knowledge while Misuka skeptically asks if he still hates the powerful sage. He tells the maid to stop taunting him while she notes that absolutely nothing gets past her. Misuka explains she has cared for him since his infancy and finally agrees to share her knowledge. She describes the knight-like chain of command that Zealous utilizes to manage his efficient golem squads. Misuka explains that larger magic stones can create squad leaders that replenish their own forces as needed. The secret lies in a multi-layered spell that allows him to cast magic without consuming much mana. Shweeth realizes the world holds many secrets while calling Zealous a literal monster of a mage. Misuka tells the stunned young man that there is still much to learn from a great sage. Shweeth asks Misuka about her age after realizing she looks the same as when he was a child. Mishka scolds the young noble for his rudeness while he apologizes frantically for asking her actual age. Zealous looks up from his book in absolute surprise when he hears a sudden and desperate request. Shweeth grovels on the floor while begging the powerful sage to beat him into proper fighting shape. The young man declares his desire to aim higher because he recognizes the untapped potential of magic. Zealous reflects on the essence of magic while remembering how they meddled with spells in their rooms. The sage admits he never expected this request considering all the trouble they caused in the past. He recalls being called an annihilator due to the massive collateral damage their spells caused during raids. Zealous describes how they used players as guinea pigs and cursed items for their own personal amusement. He recounts being on the run after a massive annihilation spell went berserk and wiped his party. The sage remembers running amok without giving a second thought to the people he affected back then. He wonders how a reckless person like him managed to obtain the title of a great sage. Zealous closes his eyes and reminisces about those chaotic days while sitting peacefully in the quiet library. The teacher asks his new student exactly what kind of mage he hopes to become in the future. Shweeth passionately explains that he wants to be remembered as a legendary hero in the history books. Zealous cynically explains that nations create heroes as symbols to distract the masses from constant bloody slaughter. Shaken by the dark truth, the young noble admits he would never want to be a hero. The sage asks for a new goal unless he still plans on becoming just another disposable hero. Shweeth declares his new ambition to become a great mage like his grandfather and eventually surpass him. Zealous accepts the request while noting that one more person will not make a massive difference overall. The determined noble vows to not return to the academy until he has gained significant magical power. Zealous sets a strict curriculum of unlearning incantations and cramming monster knowledge found within the library. The sage warns that his lectures are difficult while Shweeth enthusiastically declares he will reach the top. Zealous thinks to himself that he is really in no position to be lecturing anyone about anything. The sun rises over the distant mountains as a brand new day of intense training begins for everyone. Shweeth struggles against mud golems while realizing that his aggressive charging strategy has left him totally vulnerable. The two students clash with the monsters while chaotic sounds of combat echo through the training area. Celestina realizes the golems are getting craftier and tells herself she must remain extremely careful during battle. Zealous observes the surrounded duo after personally increasing the combat difficulty to test their teamwork and skills. Celestina tells her brother to stick close but he stubbornly refuses to take orders from a weakling. The girl focuses with intense determination while recalling her childhood and the growth she has achieved recently. Zealous notes that Celestina is technically gifted because she lands quick hits before retreating into a safe position. The sage observes that Shweeth relies on brute force while failing to work effectively with his sister. He realizes that a lack of experience causes the young noble to act purely on his volatile emotions. Zealous believes they would be an excellent duo if they could just learn to work together as teammates. The teacher notes that acquiring physical combat skills is a slow process compared to gaming in real life. Shweeth misses a fireball attack while the mud golem dodges and moves closer to the frustrated noble. Celestina warns her brother to be careful as some golems begin moving with surprising and dangerous speed. The noble struggles as a golem pins him down while he desperately screams for the monster to leave. Celestina advises him to calm down and take in the situation while mixing up his magical attacks. The girl insists they will be defeated unless they finally start working together as a proper team. Shweeth yells back in anger asking if she is truly implying that he is holding her back. Celestina looks her brother right in the eye and firmly declares that he is definitely holding her back. Creston watches the rushing fire and notes the students still have a very long way to go. Celestina and Shweeth look completely exhausted as they catch their breath during a momentary pause in training. Zealous explains that enemies never wait for mana recovery and survival depends entirely on staying calm under pressure. Shweeth realizes the true battle begins when mana is gone and eagerly accepts the difficult and worthy challenge. Catching her breath while sweating profusely, Celestina swears she will definitely make it through this intense training session. Grinning through his exhaustion, Shweeth declares that this brutal survival training is exactly what he has always wanted. He feels himself changing because his previous school never taught him such vital and practical combat lessons before. Vowing to respond to his mentor's feelings, Shweeth accepts the harsh training as a necessary path to strength. Lunging forward with a fierce battle cry, the dedicated student lunges as she embraces her role as mage. Mishka watches with deep concern while promising to treat any injuries if the training becomes too dangerous later. The sage explains that constant training is the only way for them to grow stronger and survive reality. Zealous notes that monsters attack every opening while explaining that this harsh experience is vital for their growth. Warning that this is only the beginning, the sage reflects on the lethality of the legendary forest areas. He remembers how gaming guilds used similar methods to train new players back in the virtual world era. Zealous tells the trainees their lives belong to them because he cannot provide every answer to their problems. Advising the students to keep their minds calm, the sage notes it is fine to get heated up. He emphasizes that enemies exist within oneself and failing to understand this leads directly to an early death. Admitting he cannot be half-hearted about teaching, Zealous notes that retreating is not always a viable option anymore. He encourages the students to fail repeatedly while developing their own unique and ideal fighting styles during practice. Shweeth smiles while remarking that the wandering sage shows absolutely no mercy during their grueling and painful training. Calling for them to continue, Zealous orders the students to keep attacking him with everything they have left. Rain drips from the mansion roof as the students continue their struggle through the damp and muddy environment. Gasping for air, the students tremble in the rain after their bodies reach the absolute limit of exhaustion. Standing in the downpour, Zealous asks for their thoughts while noting real battlefields can last for 6 days. He explains that this skirmish is nothing compared to the absolute hell found within a large-scale war. Shweeth laughs maniacally while lying in the dirt because he feels lucky to participate in such intense training. Celestina gasps that she cannot stand anymore as her strength has completely left her tired and aching body. Anticipating their physical collapse, the sage reveals he prepared mana potions to help them recover their spent energy. The students frantically chug potions from wine bottles while the butler watches the chaotic scene in total confusion. Zealous explains he used wine bottles for the potions because he lacked any smaller containers for the liquid. He mumbles about the harsh training while worrying that his teachings might be insufficient for the dangerous forest. Shifting his focus, Zealous wonders about the current status of the mandragoras growing in the orphanage field nearby. Lucerus runs toward the sage in a panic while shouting that there is major trouble happening outside now. Startled by her urgency, Zealous follows Lucerus as a strange boing sound echoes from the nearby garden fields. He is shocked by the massive size and soft texture of the fully grown and highly unusual mandragoras. High-pitched screams erupt as the group struggles to pull the crying mandragora plants from the fertile soil. Zealous and Celestina watch in shock as the harvested plants react violently to being pulled from the ground. The kids find the chaos fun while Zealous worries his reputation will be ruined by these screaming plants. The narrator explains that mandragora screams bring about mental and social death rather than simple physical expiration. The blankly staring children note that the plants have not screamed enough to satisfy their strange personal needs. Zealous observes that the area will be overrun unless they continue pulling the quickly growing and screaming mandragoras. Zealous acknowledges that selling the mandragoras provides vital income for the orphanage despite his lingering moral concerns. Reluctantly deciding to help with the harvest, he realizes there is no other way around the situation. The mandragora screams in absolute agony as it feels itself being ravaged during the intense harvesting process. Zealous breaks into a cold sweat as the children watch the bizarre and confusing harvest unfold before them. The plant continues to beg for more intense physical treatment while the harvest reaches its most chaotic peak. The harvest finally concludes several hours later after the children repeatedly demand more force from the plants. Mentally damaged adults wonder if the dried mandragoras will actually sell for a profit after the long harvest. Rumors of valuable plants attract thieves to the fields while the orphanage receives a spooky and mysterious nickname. A terrified thief screams for help as he is caught during a robbery attempt at the orphanage fields. Neighbors band together to catch criminals and collect bounties while the orphanage finances finally recover after the harvest. Zealous sighs quietly while holding his book during a calm moment of reflection back at the Duke mansion. Celestina asks her sensei what is wrong while he silently considers using gear control for the next harvest. Zealous apologizes and suggests continuing the lesson after briefly considering potential anti-mandragora measures for the future orphans. The sage explains that wasted mana causes interference and adds a heavy burden to the magical caster. He warns that collapsing magic circles cause mana to run amok and destroy the entire surrounding natural environment. Shweeth blushes intensely while finding the sage's deep magical lecture to be incredibly fascinating and highly engaging. Zealous demonstrates the layered formula technique to shrink massive magic circles into manageable and much more efficient parts. He explains that carving ideas into formulas has a strict limit that restricts the total number of magics. Trimming unnecessary parts creates extra space for adding more magic within the refined and optimized layered formula structure. He notes that stronger magic requires complicated formulas that could potentially cover an entire large sports coliseum. Shweeth asks if giving away such a powerful trump card so easily could lead to creating bad magic. Zealous explains that he teaches foundations so the mage can decide how to use specific magical techniques properly. Shweeth realizes with absolute shock that he can significantly increase the total amount of magic he can use. The students sit quietly at their desks while working diligently on their magical studies during the late night. Shweeth tells Celestina that she has changed because she no longer runs away from him immediately anymore. Celestina admits she feels different and fully capable of using magic since meeting her amazing new teacher. Both siblings feel strangely refreshed while acknowledging the positive impact of their recent and intense magical training. They suspect someone was manipulating them in the past but firmly refuse to ever return to the academy. Celestina mentions her brother Croix, which causes Shweeth to scream that he absolutely hates hearing that name. Shweeth complains that Croix is arrogant and completely ignores everyone around him with a very cold attitude. Celestina looks sad while realizing that her older brother and the others have not changed at all. Celestina's brand new equipment finally arrives and tension immediately begins to rise among the waiting group. Shweeth looks on in disbelief as the others decide he can simply take care of himself. Creston clenches his fist while declaring he would even make a deal with the devil for her. The older man shocks everyone by jokingly claiming he is selling someone else's soul instead. He firmly vows to never let that happen while considering seeing his granddaughter become a bride. The grandfather reconsiders his stance if the young girl were to actually become the sage's bride. Zealous desperately begs to not be involved in the older man's weird and confusing personal delusions. The sage asks Creston if he wants to die while the older man worries about great-grandchildren. Zealous calls the old man rotten to the core as Creston expresses his immense excitement for children. The new gear includes a mithril breastplate, serpent skin gauntlets, and a powerful auriculum magic scepter. Everyone gasps in total shock at the treasure class kit that seems far too valuable to buy. Zealous questions if the expensive equipment was purchased using the people's hard-earned sweat and blood. Delsasis suddenly intervenes and asks his father if he actually relied on proper and legal means. The current lord introduces himself while Zealous politely expresses his personal honor at meeting the man. Delsasis wonders what his idiotic father is doing after learning about the meddled royal treasury. The lord mentions a guard's bribe and attempted suicide while the group processes the shocking information. Creston shivers as his son sternly orders him to stop involving the young granddaughter in this mess. The Duke warns that Celestina might be deeply hurt because her grandfather clearly overdid his actions. Delsasis expects his father to clean up the mess himself after the older man clicks his tongue. Zealous asks the Lord exactly what was sold and learns about 2 missing wyvern magic stones. Delsasis explains the royal gift is gone forever because getting the stones back is likely impossible. The sage suggests he might have something useful on hand if the Lord does not mind. Everyone stares in shock as Zealous freely offers rare stones while jokingly wishing for an execution. He casually explains he has more laying around and happened to acquire the valuable items for free. The noble family promises to repay the kindness after incurring another favor from the great sage. Zealous suggests that 1 piece of land will be sufficient for him to farm self-sufficiently later. The Lord offers a plot behind the Wailing Church which leaves the wandering sage feeling quite confused. Zealous slams the door and realizes the nickname likely stems from the screaming and harvested mandragoras. Everyone completely ignores Shweeth while the determined young magician remains passionately wrapped up in his formulas. The text box announces that 3 full days have officially passed since their intense conversation ended. A group of armored knights marches through the city gates while preparing for their upcoming mission. Creston complains about the small number of knights while Zealous smokes and suggests it is enough. The sage observes the lack of experienced earth mages while noting his acquaintances are wrapped in craft. The Grand Duke completes his preparations and looks forward to working with his brave grandchildren. A knight notices the sword on Zealous' hip and questions why a mage is carrying it. Zealous argues that a mage capable of close combat is much more useful on a dangerous battlefield. The foreign sage suggests backline mages abandoning positions just to survive is a terrible strategy. He questions why knights would ever rely on mages who hide and flee at any given moment. Zealous explains that mages must hold their positions and assist knights to increase their survival odds. Aleph Gilbert introduces himself as the unit commander while Zealous formally accepts his role as instructor. The grandfather notes the wait before Tina apologizes while showing off her new equipment and finishing changing clothes. Zealous emphasizes keeping packs light while they discuss the necessary books and medicinal mixing equipment for their journey. He decides to personally handle managing the heavy gear while the others prepare for their long journey ahead. The students wonder about the inventory magic that even their sensei claims he does not fully understand himself. Zealous observes that he is clearly not a god and infers an omnipotent being must have created this. The grandfather tells Tina to quietly assassinate any knights who act stupidly while they are not looking nearby. Tina announces their departure while the crying grandfather desperately begs for his precious granddaughter to return safely later. The party officially departs by carriage and proceeds east through the highroad toward the great woods of Faflan. Shweeth asks if it is ironic for him to want land while admitting he hates people abusing power. Zealous looks at Shweeth while the narrative transition highlights the bond between the teacher and his new student. He explains his modest goals of working hard on the field to earn money and live normally here. The sage worries that his alchemy would crash the market while expressing his desperate desire for a house. Shweeth notices that something feels off as Zealous struggles with the difficulty of acting like a normal citizen. Arriving at the Great Woods, Zealous instructs the students to dig a defensive pitfall while he builds walls. The sage prepares a magic note and explains he is summoning a familiar while Shweeth asks about it. He summons a spectral phoenix made of pure mana to serve as his scouting eye in the sky. He explains that summons can be used offensively but their power varies greatly depending on the individual summoner. Zealous asks if Shweeth meant him when calling him master while the student thinks he is totally insane. Shweeth insists they should be clear about their relationship since he is currently learning magic from the sage. The sage bluntly says there is no need for labels while asking the student to try this arcana. The students scream with absolute joy and excitement as they experience the amazing new magic for themselves now. Flying high above the world, Tina rejoices at seeing the landscape from a perspective she never imagined before. From their high vantage point they suddenly spot a group of orcs moving dangerously close to their position. Aleph calls out to Zealous while asking if something is wrong after seeing the sage reaction to monsters. Zealous reports that a party of around 20 or 30 orcs is currently lurking nearby in the woods. Aleph gasps in shock and immediately asks the sage for his professional opinion on how to handle them. The commander screams for all his men to prepare for battle as the immediate threat of combat approaches. Zealous observes the incredibly fast response of the knights while noticing their disciplined movements during the chaotic situation. He notes that everyone present is around level 25, which Aleph finds very good to hear now. The sage decides it is finally time to begin while the knights watch him with intense and focused eyes. Grinning with anticipation, the powerful sage declares that the hunt is officially about to begin for the group. Looking through the trees, they see the orcs are already on high alert under the two bright moons. Aleph asks if the monsters are broken up while noting the orcs are currently sticking together in groups. The commander notes the orcs likely picked up their scent because an orc is basically just a pig. Shweeth and Tina wonder how the pigs found them since orcs are usually not this sharp or perceptive. The group decides to maneuver around the high-leveled numbers before they start roasting the monsters with magic. The text announces a judgment arrow spell being cast during the heat of the intense and approaching battle. The knights scream in absolute terror as the massive power of the magical attack unfolds before their eyes. The narrator introduces a mysterious girl who also reincarnated into this strange fantasy world alongside the great sage. Iris Sumika was a lonely 14-year-old student who sought refuge in the virtual world of online games. Waking up in a dense forest, she looks around in total confusion while wondering exactly where she is. Spotting two moons in the night sky, she realizes this world matches the game's sword and sorceress perfectly. She steels herself with determination while preparing to face the unknown challenges that this new life will bring. Opening her status menu, she hopes to become a legendary hero and embark on a grand magical adventure. Her screen displays the name Iris and reveals she is a powerful level 237 offensive mage. Looking down at her chest, she realizes with disappointment that her real body remains small and very underdeveloped. She decides to check her vast inventory for different clothes because her heavy gear makes moving very difficult. Sumika screams in frustration because she kept her real body instead of her sexy and well-endowed avatar. A message from Goddess Windya explains that she died and reincarnated after the sealed deity destroyed the game. Realizing she can never see her mother again, she accepts her new reality as a reincarnated adventurer here. Despite the sudden tragedy, she feels immense excitement about finally living her lifelong dream of being a hero. Concerned about her total lack of cooking skills, she decides to search for a town and some food. 1 hour later, the starving girl continues walking while worrying about dangerous monsters appearing in the dark night. She finally spots a village in the distance and feels a huge wave of relief wash over her. Approaching a massive wooden bulwark, she confirms that people definitely live inside the protected and heavily fortified settlement. She calls out to the gatekeepers and prepares to beg for some food to satisfy her intense hunger. A friendly villager welcomes her inside while sympathizing with her bad luck of being lost and alone today. Sumika suddenly panics internally while wondering if she just accidentally walked into a dangerous and hidden bandit hideout. The villager explains the bulwark is necessary because goblins have been attacking their small and peaceful village lately. He laments that a higher breed of goblin has taken complete control over all of their precious crops. They discuss the possibility of a powerful goblin knight leading the current horde of monsters toward the village. Iris analyzes the goblin hierarchy and estimates they are facing a horde of around 20 or 30 enemies. She introduces herself as a mage and offers her magical services in exchange for a warm bed and food. The grateful villagers accept her generous offer while mentioning they have already hired several mercenaries from the city. The village leader admits that 2 girls might not be enough to stop the incoming horde of monsters. Villagers whisper that Iris seems much more reliable than the scary mercenaries who are currently watching the children. They finalize the deal and warn her that the goblins usually appear right when the sun begins setting. Goblins suddenly emerge from the east while Iris prepares to use her extensive raid knowledge to defeat them. The mercenaries engage the goblins in a brutal struggle while the monsters scream and attack with primitive weapons. Iris asks the village chief for confirmation regarding the identity of the mercenaries fighting the incoming goblin horde. The chief watches the swaying mercenaries while Iris angrily tells him to focus on the dangerous situation instead. A mercenary complains about his injuries while the young girl realizes the men are only interested in breasts. Iris unleashes a powerful ice blast while declaring that women possess much more than just their physical attributes. The villagers cheer in absolute amazement as the young lady uses her magic to seal the broken wall. She warns the group that the goblins might break more holes if the battle continues for too long. A mercenary tells the girl to leave everything to them despite the overwhelming numbers of the enemy horde. The young mage feels the physical weight of reality while watching the violent and bloody combat unfold here. The chief asks if she is okay while the exhausted girl realizes that this world is truly real. The monsters remain outside despite usually fleeing, which suggests they are being led by someone quite intelligent. Numerous shadowy goblin figures wait in the forest while the group realizes their previous attacks were just tests. Armed goblins utilize a clever decoy to breach the bulwark, indicating a leader much higher than a knight. Terrified villagers desperately climb the outer wall while shouting for their archers to shoot arrows at the enemies. Iris is completely overwhelmed by the sight of over 100 goblins swarming the poorly defended village wall. The young mage authoritatively orders the chief to protect thin spots while she handles the massive central group. Desperately wanting to survive her new life, Iris prepares to fight with everything to avoid a premature end. Utilizing her immense magical power, Iris unleashes a devastating rock needle field that pierces through the ground below. The chief is stunned when the young girl effortlessly casts a powerful spell without using any vocal incantations. Encouraged by her incredible display of power, the villagers excitedly follow the brave little lady into the fray. Iris focuses her magical energy to prepare a follow-up tornado spell while the goblins remain stuck and vulnerable. A massive magical vortex erupts across the battlefield while violently tossing the screaming goblin monsters into the air. She realizes her aim was slightly off, but the villagers remain absolutely horrified by her grotesque magical results. The battle intensifies as the villagers urgently shout for someone to help defend the vulnerable western side wall. Iris scans the chaotic battlefield while wondering where the elusive higher breed leader could be hiding right now. Realizing the massive swarm might be a diversion, she urgently shouts for everyone to stay on their guard. She commands the villagers to move toward the fewest goblins since the higher breed has not appeared yet. A villager screams in absolute terror as a massive and menacing shadow suddenly looms over the retreating group. Iris and the villagers gasp in horror upon finally encountering the terrifying presence of a massive goblin general. Panic erupts as the villagers scream for everyone to run away before the powerful monster kills them all. The group frantically shouts to close the gate leading to the fields while the general approaches them quickly. Jean grunts in frustration while facing the overwhelming pressure of the looming and very dangerous goblin leader monster. Iris raises her arms and begins focusing a high-level magical charge to counter the incoming enemy leader's strength. She unleashes a powerful homing thunder arrow spell that zips through the air toward the targeted goblin enemies. A rescued mercenary named Jean thanks the young wandering magician for saving her life during the intense battle. The young girl hesitantly introduces herself as Iris while explaining her status as a wandering and capable magician. Lena and Jean join forces with Iris as they prepare to support each other with powerful combat magic.